Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Asheville. I'm Jane Bramham, today's worship associate. We're glad all of you, members, friends, visitors, whether you're live streaming or watching the video, are present with us. If you're listening and want to learn more about us, click on the link in the chat box, and while in chat, you can say hello and let us know where you're watching. Whether you are new or have heard these words hundreds of times, we want you to know that wherever you come from, whomever you are, and whomever you love, you are welcome here. We're grateful for our worship team this morning, lead minister Reverend Kathy Harrington, Reverend Claudia Jimenez, Les Downs, our music director, Hillary Trumpler, soloist, and our tech team, Steve Rains, Jess Fox, and Jen Bennett. Now, let us prepare for worship. May our time together, as our music asks, grant us peace.
Dona nobis pacem, pacem. Dona nobis 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 pacem, pacem. Dona nobis 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 pacem.
Thank you, Hillary. I'm a little nervous this morning. There's people here, yay. So bear with me. Our opening words this morning are by David C. Pohl. We come to this time and this place to rediscover the wondrous gift of free religious community, to renew our faith in the holiness, the goodness, and the beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and the full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, and to reclaim the vision of an earth made fair and all her people one. This morning I light our chalice with these words by Deborah Burr, and I will also light a candle for the veterans in gratitude for all veterans. Fire consumes and casts a bright light. May our chalice flames consume our regrets for the past and our fears about the future and our worries about today. May it light a path for us of peace and joy. thank you to all our veterans. And now we have a wisdom story from Claudia.
Good morning. It is wonderful to see your masked faces. Your eyes are shining. I'm Reverend Claudia Jimenez, and I serve this congregation as Minister of Faith Development. And I bring you a special story this morning, and I invite you to use visualization as I read our story this morning. It's entitled Granddad's Prayers of the Earth by Douglas Wood. When I was little, my granddad was my best friend. Being with him always made the world seem right. On our walks, I would ask him all kinds of questions. One day, I asked him about prayers. For a long time, he was quiet. He didn't say anything until we came to the tallest trees in the forest. And then he answered with a question. Did you know that trees pray? I listened closely, but I did not hear anything. See how they reach for the sky, he said. They reach and reach for clouds and sun and moon and stars. What else is reaching for the sky but a prayer? As we walked, we saw large mossy rocks. Rocks pray too, Granddad said. Pebbles and boulders and old weathered hills. They are still and silent, and those are two important ways to pray. I thought hard about the rocks. I picked up a pebble and stuck it in my pocket. We kept walking and came to a stream. Do streams pray too, Granddad? I asked. Yes, said Granddad. They sometimes pray silently like the rocks. Sometimes they pray with movement as they flow across the earth. Other times they pray with laughter, chuckling, dancing, and leaping into the air and falling back again. There are so many ways to pray, he said. The tall grasses, the winds, the birds, they all have their way of praying. All the living beings in the world pray. Each living thing gives its life to the beauty of all life, and that gift is its prayer. Then we were quiet. I thought about the rocks, trees, flowers, and birds praying. Finally, I asked, do people pray? Grandpa smiled and ruffled my hair. People pray some of the most wonderful prayers, he said. Bending down to smell a flower, quietly watching a sunrise and saying hello to a new day, standing in a snowy wood and watching your breath become part of the breath of the world, making music or painting a picture can be forms of prayer. Holding hands around a table with friends or family, remembering what holds us together, and giving thanks is one of the greatest prayers. Sometimes people pray when they are sad or sick or lonely. They may say words they learned from others, or they may make them up themselves, or they may be silent. It was time to walk back, and I had one final question. What do you think that question was? Granddad, are our prayers answered? He smiled. Most prayers are not really questions. If we listen closely, a prayer is its own answer. We pray because we are here, not to change the world, but to change ourselves. Because it is when we change ourselves that the world is changed. Granddad and I went for many walks after that one. I often listen for prayers of the earth, but was never sure I heard them. Then one day, Granddad was gone. No matter how hard I prayed, he didn't come back. He couldn't come back. The world seemed dark and lonely without Granddad. Until one day, on a walk, I found a big rock under tall trees. The branches swayed in the breeze. I heard a stream flowing and robins nearby. And in the sounds of the birds, the breezes, the water, I heard prayers. The earth was praying, just like my granddad said. So I joined in. Thank you, I prayed. Thank you, trees, sweet flowers, singing birds. Thank you, Granddad, for being part of my life. And as I prayed, something changed, and my granddad seemed somehow near. And for the first time in a long time, the world seemed just right. That is our wisdom story this morning. I wonder what your favorite part of the story was. I wonder what you think prayer is. I wonder what you think about the conversation between the boy and his grandfather. May today's service further expand your understanding of prayer and what it may be. And this morning, I have a special privilege. After our story, I will be joining our coming of age youth and their mentors today for their class. For that, indeed, I am grateful. Thank you for listening.
So now we have hymn 1008, When Our Heart Is in a Holy Place. Hillary's going to sing. If you feel comfortable, you're allowed to hum along.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
I'm excited to announce a joint project that UUC Asheville has embarked upon. Amy Cantrell from Beloved Food Pantry is going to be in a video to explain the project to you. This is an opportunity for us to help our neighbors in need, especially those neighbors without homes, without shelter. Warm socks are one of the greatest gifts that you can add to the pantry in addition to food. There's a wonderful list. We'll see Amy share this dream that she has with you.
Good Sunday morning, friends, at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation, Asheville. So grateful to be with you in your service today as you're focused on rediscovering prayer and you're focused on connecting with one another, and particularly in living out your faith in the world. And so I'm really grateful to be coming to you remote from one of our beloved street pantries. And I want to tell you how excited I am that you all are joining in a partnership with us to adopt our 14th street pantry on Charlotte Street coming up in December. So I wanted to come to you today and just show you what a street pantry is and tell you why it's so meaningful to me and so many others that have been a part of this particular work that Beloved has been engaged in. So when the pandemic happened and the shutdown occurred in March of 2020, we realized that so many people in our community couldn't access the resources that they needed to survive because so many things had to close and shut down. And so we deployed these street pantries. We started with 2, and that has grown from 2 in downtown Asheville to now pantries in every corner of the city: Black Mountain, Candler, 2 in Arden, in North Asheville. And so we're really grateful for this space that really makes resources accessible to people 24/7. So anybody can come up to the pantry and take out a resource, no questions asked. So you can see I've started to fill this pantry. Today I've got socks, warm socks in here, Kleenex, bottled water, some snacks. We're going to add to that some fresh, this is fruit. It's really a wonderful thing for folks, particularly in the winter, provides vitamin C and those nourishing resources. Of course, hot hands, which are really vital. It's very cold out here. It's going to be 27 this weekend. So those are very particularly important. Here's some cough drops. So that's something that can go in the pantry. So we have a whole list of a variety of items that you can add. These items include non-perishable food, water, first aid supplies, also like warm socks and gloves and things like that. I have today, these are thick gloves rated to 20 degrees. These are very particularly important. So there's a whole list of items that you can add to the pantries, and it's just as simple. I have a little tub that I bring pantry items in, and I just place those in there. So you don't need to get everything off the list every time. You just sort of stock a variety of items. These are really wonderful meals with a pop top lid. You can see I put in a duffel bag. Backpacks, things like that are very, very helpful. We got some more warm gloves down here. Hand sanitizer is very, very helpful to folks that have a hard time accessing hygiene. Also baby wipes, toiletries, shampoos, soaps, deodorant, very, very helpful. And then items like these are just some crackers that folks can eat. We try to really make it look like a grocery shelf. So things in here, and I'll add more in a minute. But I just want to talk to you about how simple it is, and so many people have told us what a difference this is making for them. So finally, rediscovering prayer. For me, this is a way to make prayer concrete. our prayers come out in our feet and our hands out in the world. So if you've ever prayed for somebody that's really struggling with hunger or homelessness, this is a powerful way to turn your prayers into actions. And I can't tell you what a difference it makes for somebody just to be able to open this on a cold night and be able to get gifts of warmth. You can roll up small blankets and put in here. We also have emergency blankets that we source and put in here. So there's lots of different items that are so helpful. And so I want to invite you to live your prayers and rediscover the spirituality of solidarity that comes from joining our friends on the streets and our neighbors who are struggling right where they live and are at the street pantry. I hope that you'll meet some people and connect in that way, and really begin to invite one another, welcome one another into the sanctuary of community that comes when we turn strangers into friends. And this is a powerful way to do that. So we invite you to sign up. We'll be coming to dedicate the pantry in the beginning of December on a Sunday, right after your service. So these are ways that you can connect with us and get involved here in the community to make a very powerful difference in some of the silent emergencies like hunger. There are people everywhere around us in the city, within a stone's throw, who are struggling just to have enough to eat, just to have the things that they need to stay warm. And we know this shouldn't be. And the beginning of justice is solidarity, is moving ourselves to the streets and beginning to operate with our spirituality in ways that begin to transform our city and world. And so we're so excited that you all are partnering with us in this way. And so let's pray together in the work of our hands. Take care, and thanks so much.
As we continue the work of the congregation, we have with us today Kathy Cleary from our Community Plate recipient for this month, Bountiful Cities.
Hi, and thank you for having me today. It's great to be here with some people actually in the audience. I'm going to talk about Bountiful Cities, which is an organization that is near and dear to my heart and has been for a long time. I volunteered as a board member and as a co-founder of the Feast program, which is part of Bountiful Cities, and now I work with Bountiful Cities. We've been around since 2000. We're an urban agriculture organization, and we focus our work on equity and on long-term food security solutions. And I'll tell you a story to sort of talk about what long-term food security solutions look like and how we try to center it in equity. So one of the gardens that we work with is in the Shiloh community, and the Shiloh Community Garden was started by members of that community, organized by members of that community, and run by members of the Shiloh community. And the way that we work with them is that we collaborate. So we might write grants and give them access to supplies that they might not otherwise have access to, and we collaborate through education and organizing educational events. Our community garden network has over 30 community gardens as part of it, and each month we host a free workshop that anyone is welcome to come to on all kinds of topics, maybe seed saving or tool repair. Could be next month ours is on vermiculture or worm composting. And these events support communities in finding ways to grow, literally, long-term food security solutions. And the way that that has played out in the Shiloh community is they gather and harvest every Saturday morning, and they put together food boxes and deliver those food boxes to folks within their community. Other ways that we focus on long-term food security solutions is through our FEAST program, which stands for Fresh, Easy, Affordable, Sustainable, and Tasty. And FEAST works in schools and after-school programs. And we work with kids. So talk about long-term food security. We are teaching kids about food and gardening. In a recent feast class at the Lucy Herring Elementary School, we harvested sweet potatoes, and the kids learned all about the sweet potatoes, but they also learned that the vines and the leaves of the sweet potato plant are also edible, which is something not a lot of adults know in our community. And this is the kind of knowledge that they will take with them for the rest of their lives. And it means that they have food sovereignty. They have more control over where their food comes from. So that's another example of long-term food security. And then the last thing that I'll talk about is our policy work. It's definitely not the sexiest part of Bountiful Cities, but it is so necessary that we have our government agencies working on policies that enable people to have control over their food. So we are one of the founding members of the Asheville-Buncombe Food Policy Council, and we've been instrumental in getting a food action plan in place with the city of Asheville. And we have recently also launched, sort of in conjunction but separately, the Food Justice Planning Initiative. And we've brought together organizations from across the 18 westernmost counties of North Carolina to do justice and food policy work. So there's a lot more, but you can go to our website and find out more, bountifulcities.org, and if somebody is able to put the links in the chat to our website. We love for people to come out and volunteer in our gardens. We have a lot of opportunities for that to happen. And of course, we are always accepting donations. This work is done in community and in collaboration, and you are part of our community, and we're so glad. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. During this time of online church and this beginning transition towards being together in the sanctuary, UUCA continues the work of nurturing our spirits and keeping our community connected. Donations can be made via snail mail, by texting UUAVL to 73256, or on our website with a link in the chat box. For the gifts of your time, your talent, presence, prayers, and financial support, we are grateful.
In the center of our service and in the center of our lives, let us pause to honor the silences of the world. Let us open our hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain and the soft, gentle coming of love. I want to share with you a prayer I found just yesterday, a poem, actually. It's called How Prayer Works by Kaveh Akbar. Tucked away in our tiny bedroom, so near each other, the edge of the prayer rug covered my prayer rug covered the edge of his, my brother, and I prayed. We were 18 and 11, maybe 19 and 12. He was back from college where he built his own computer and girls kissed him on the mouth. I was barely anything, just wanted to be left alone to read or watch The Simpsons. We prayed together as we had done 1,000 times, rushing ablutions over the sink, laying our janamazes out over the window, facing the elm, which one summer held an actual crow's nest, full of baby crows, fuzzy, black-beaked fruit. They were miracles that we did not think to treasure. My brother and I hurried through sloppy postures of praise, quiet as the light pooling around us. The room was so small that the twin bed took up nearly all of it. And as my brother, tall and endless, moved to kneel, his foot caught the coiled brass doorstop, which issued forth a loud boom. The noise crashed through the room like a long, wet bullet shredding through porcelain. My brother bit back a smirk, and I tried to stifle a snort, but solemnity ignored our pleas, and we erupted, laughter quaking out of our faces, into our bodies, and through the floor. We were hopeless, laughing at our laughing, our glee, an infinite rope fraying off in every direction. It's not that we forgot God or the martyrs or the prophet's holy word, quite the opposite. In fact, we were boys built to love what was in front of our faces, my brother and I, on the floor, draped across each other, laughing tears into our prayer rugs. Let us take time to honor the silence and share a moment of silence together. You're invited at this time to write in the chat box any joy or sorrow that you would like to share with the congregation, and those of you here in the sanctuary, you're also invited to light a candle of memory or hope. If you have shared a joy, know that this community rejoices with you. And if you have shared a sorrow, know that you are held in love and care by this community.
From last week's JAMA article on healthcare providers coping with emptiness and loss, rediscovering meaning through compassion during this COVID pandemic. And I quote, "For some, meditation and prayer are helpful ways to quiet the mind and reach the spiritual awareness that lies beyond the deceitful veil of the sense of absolute control and self-sufficiency." I believe that that is true. But in 1996, I would have said of prayer, the only ones I know are the Lord's and grace I learned at church camp. Prayers for victory, whether biblical, national, or for football, denied the dignity and worth, even in their God's eyes, of the opponent and angered me. I had tired of coaxing and coaching others to deliver inclusive public meeting prayers. And then there was Bill. Bill prayed all the time, in all situations. Bill was my colleague and my friend and my surgeon. I knew that Bill prayed with patients and with their families, but I didn't know he would pray with me. I was lying on a gurney, transitioned from cancer doctor to cancer patient, a surgical shower cap, those lovely things on my head, and I was freezing cold. I was prepped for a mastectomy. Bill walked in and took my hand and prayed. Startled, I almost asked him to stop. It wasn't a long prayer, no hell or heaven, no platitudes about cure. His prayer told me I was a person, not a surgical case. He was prepared and focused on what needed to be done. Caring people would surround me. That was the start of healing. Today, I believe that when my wish becomes intention and changes me, when I'm awestruck by nature and stay with that instead of reaching for my phone camera, when my thank you is heartfelt and gratitude connects me with the giver, when my worry about someone moves from my need to fix it to holding them in the light, I have prayed.
Well, that sums up my sermon. Thank you, Jay. That was beautiful. We do. We have a beautiful video before I do my sermon. Sorry.
Oh Lord, kumbaya.
All right, now I've lost my first page. Hold on a second. Oh, here it is. Okay. All right, rediscovering prayer. When I entered seminary, I considered myself a Unitarian Universalist Christian because I followed the teachings of Jesus, and the Unitarian Christianity of William Ellery Channing affirmed my understanding of Christianity as I was taught in Christian Science Sunday School. It's also a Unitarian theology, meaning that they don't think Jesus was God. I was taught that God is love in Sunday school and that Jesus was a teacher. A Unitarian theology means believing in the unity of God and objecting to the doctrine of the Trinity, which, in the words of Channing, subverts the unity of God. According to the doctrine of Trinity, there are three infinite and equal persons possessing supreme divinity called the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Channing goes on to challenge the opponents of his liberal faith to produce just one passage of Scripture in the New Testament where the word God means three persons. It just isn't there. Jesus was a teacher whose teachings have been distorted, contorted, and manipulated by theologians for centuries, not another form of God who became a man to appease God. Channing's sermon, Unitarian Christianity, delivered at the ordination of Jared Sparks on May 5th, 1819, states that Unitarians believe in the oneness and unity of Jesus Christ, that Jesus is one mind, one soul, one being, as truly we all are, distinct from God. These early Unitarian Christians believed that Jesus was sent by God to effect a moral or spiritual deliverance of mankind. In my seminary, Starr King School for the Ministry in Berkeley, California, I was one of the more conservatives in my beliefs. Only 20% of Unitarian Universalists call themselves Christian, but I would venture to say I was in a minority of less than 2% at Starr King. Traditional Christians, I found out, consider the term Unitarian Universalist Christian an oxymoron, and I encountered this misunderstanding firsthand when I did my CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education, training at a major trauma hospital in Greenville, South Carolina. As you know, the upstate of South Carolina, like many other places, has been called the buckle of the Bible Belt. I was considered, in my class, my CPE class, a raging liberal. It was interesting and challenging for me, which, as it turns out, was only the beginning for me of learning to live on the margins of a community, a religious community, where an atmosphere of misunderstanding and even disdain for my faith was prevalent. South Carolina summers posed a formidable challenge for me. It was apparent when I arrived at the hospital my first day with a summer dress and sandals that pantyhose were an unwritten rule for hospital staff. So I went to the mall after work and bought what I thought would be the proper fit for my long legs. Turns out you need a PhD in physics just to decipher the size charts on packages. When I arrived at work the next day at the conference table, which was a meeting we had every morning, both of my knees let loose with a sound that was bzzzt. My new hose were ruined. Looking nonchalant, I fled to the bathroom to assess the damage. And after way too many uncomfortable failures, as a last resort, I wound up at a Kmart where I found a size 3X. It was a miracle. I had found the solution to my pantyhose. buy them huge. Then you only have to worry about the extra material at the waist. You just roll them down. My best friend, one of my best friends in seminary, Jeff Lampkin, when I told this story after that summer, he said to me, "Oh, Kathy, don't you see it's perfect? When you want to rob a bank, all you have to do is just pull them up over your head." Thank you for laughing. It's just been so hard to preach without an audience. So my CPE internship in the Pastoral Care Department of the Greenville Memorial Hospital system is a training that provides pastoral care and chapel services to the 6 healthcare facilities that make up the GHS, including psychiatric and rehabilitation facilities. Each intern is assigned 2 permanent areas to cover daily, and as a group we took turns covering these areas. And sometimes we were on weekend calls, which meant you were responsible for all the pastoral care emergencies of the entire Greenville hospital system. Fortunately for me, I went with prior chaplaincy experience, and I had been present at death many times. I found the presence of the holy in those experiences were comforting for me. I was confident at this point that I was going to be, ready for CPE, but I was in shock. I was in for a shock. One of the first things we had to do was write our desired goals for the summer, and I knew more than anything that I wanted to learn to pray with people. I wanted to know how to be helpful. Little did I know that the very next day was my first solo on call, was to provide a learning for me. It was a Sunday morning, and I arrived with my guitar and a little short homily to deliver 3 separate services with music that morning. 10 minutes after I arrived, the beeper went off, and I was called to pediatric ICU. The nurse explained to me that a 2-year-old little girl had a drowning accident, and she was on life support. There was no hope. They asked me to come quickly. I ran to the elevator and prayed that I would know what to do. There were over 20 family members present, and their agony was excruciating. It had to be the worst pain I had ever seen. I prayed with them clumsily. I cried with them. I traded their wet tissues for clean tissues and felt utterly helpless in the face of this crisis. For almost 4 hours with shattered hearts, we grieved. The young doctor who was caring for this family was in so much pain. You could see it in his face. Yet he endured and lovingly cared for the lifeless child, knowing that it was hopeless, giving the family the time to accept the tragic truth. And the nurse's hands were gentle and competent. She maintained her poise. Her courageous hands bathed the precious child and dressed her in clean clothes, and the mother and father held her for the last time and brushed her hair. The utter horror of that tragedy was almost inconceivable, and I will never forget that family. And I will never forget the remarkable nurse and doctor and the loving way they ministered to that family. If there is a God, I remembered thinking he worked through them that day. We couldn't have done what we had to do without the loving presence of the divine, of God. I didn't know. But if there is a God, why didn't he save her? How could he let this happen? Family members hugged me as they left and said goodbye and thanked me for all I had done. I didn't think I had done anything. I went home that night with an aching pain in my chest, exhausted but couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned with the same horrible scene cast over and over in my mind, and I wrestled with my faith. The pain in my chest would ease a little bit, only to return more intensely again and again as I responded to endless calls for prayer, mercy, and hope. I started to wonder if the chaplaincy profession was even valid. For that matter, my doubts and my questions about God came surging to the surface, but my supervisor said I was the energy of the group in evaluation because I challenged the oversimplifying notion of God's will. What kind of God would permit this hideous tragedy to occur? My belief in an all-powerful God was gone forever, and prayer felt like meaningless phrases cast to the wind to dissipate into oblivion, unheard and unheeded. But there was a presence there. Love was present undeniably in all that suffering. One of my colleagues, a chaplain resident, was a Pentecostal, and she and I became close friends in spite of our differing religious views. She was a wonderfully dedicated chaplain, and rumor had it that she'd even raised a couple people from the deathbeds. But the suffering that we encountered severely challenged her beliefs as well. And one day before class, she offered a beautiful devotion, and she had some tape music, a Christian song that I thought was a bit schmaltzy, but it was nice. Yet none of it mattered. Her prayer was an aching plea that we all shared for answers, comfort to the suffering that we were witnessing day after day. It was a sincere yearning filled with anger and deep sorrow. Her candid unveiling of pent-up grief and frustration spoke for us all. And before long, we sort of fell into a calm, a sense of peace that was palpable. We were moved to tears, but we rested in the embrace of that sacred silence for almost an hour, wanting it to never end. Today, I think I would call that presence, that power, community-forming power, James Luther Adams' favorite definition of God, or Paul Tillich's definition of God, ground of all being. Whatever it was invoked by love and compassion and hope and relationship and longing, not the right words. I spent that whole summer searching for answers about the nature of God and finding more questions and more suffering, more babies dying, tragedies that I can't even count. I even thought of giving up seminary and becoming a nurse. It seemed more useful. And boy, did I long for the days when I was a successful hairdresser with a satisfied and happy clientele. I was a hero every 30 minutes with a pair of scissors in my hand. And then I reminisced about the bakery I owned in Seward, Alaska, where the smell of fresh bread just made people happy, peaceful. But it was too hard. And I only had me. I had to walk into these rooms with nothing, no bread, no scissors, just me. And I wasn't enough. The chaplain's mantra is, don't just do something, stand there. And I found myself envying the other chaplains who prayed with such ease. In Jesus' name we pray. They would close their prayer effortlessly. It seemed like they never wanted for words. For me, it was I was hopelessly inadequate, and I did a whole lot of just stand there. How could I pray with people when I couldn't believe in prayer, or that God would answer or even hear our prayers? What kind of God would ignore the cries of some and bless a few? My 30 years of hairdressing gave me the ease of engaging with people. I was grateful for that, because that's the way my chaplaincy took form, of witness, compassion, and relationship, and yet I still felt like a failure. Once I was sitting at the bedside of a dying man, and out of the clear blue, he pulled his oxygen mask off his face and said, "Don't let anyone tell you what you do isn't important." I was so surprised that a shiver went through me. He was a grouchy old Yankee who had thrown me out of his room a couple of times before, saying he didn't need a chaplain. I tried to check in on him, though, every chance I got. And that day, he wanted some sweet tea. I could do that. I had something to carry to him. I got him tea from the cafeteria and went back and rubbed his forehead, fed him some lunch, rather clumsily, as he pointed out. His fears and pain were great, and I listened. I stayed with him. I had the luxury of time. The nurses are so busy. They have so many patients. I had the luxury of time to be with him, and I was beginning to understand God is relational. I hadn't heard of James Luther Adams' definition of God, community forming power at that point. And I remembered the Bible verse, he who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. Love. God is the presence of love that is actualized when we risk authentic relationship. One day I was crazy busy facilitating a spirituality workshop, a caregiver support group, and also my other duties. I'd been working all day, and it was my night to stay over for on-call. I was already exhausted, and I prayed, I hoped, that it would just be a quiet night. But it was to be a busy night. There were 2 deaths that night, and more tasks than I knew how to handle. I didn't have time, though, to wonder whether I was enough. I didn't have time. It reminded me of the time I bowled 220. I had a 110 average, but this one night, I was distracted caring for my 2-year-old's needs. They called me from the nursery that he needed a diaper change, and every time I'd go back, I'd just roll the ball and run to the car, roll the ball. I kept rolling strikes because I wasn't trying. It was like magic. So finally, around 11 p.m., I calmed down and I went to the mezzanine floor where the overnight rooms were for the on-call staff, dreaming of ridding myself of those cursed pantyhose, when I received another page. I was called to the bedside of a heart patient facing open heart surgery the next morning. They had asked him to sign a release statement that there was a risk that he could die on the operating table. He was so frightened he couldn't sleep. He told me that he was a retired Baptist minister, but he was so paralyzed with fear that he couldn't even pray or remember any Bible verses. And I thought, oh, thank goodness, because I don't remember any Bible verses either. But could he draw from my strength? Did I have enough faith? Could I pray with him? Was my questioning faith enough? But my heart was filled with compassion for this man, and I understood how badly fear can debilitate us. We talked for a long time, held hands, prayed together. I prayed with sincerity and love, remembering Psalm 91, "May you be held in the shelter of the Most High." We both had a healing that night. That sweet Baptist minister fell into a peaceful sleep, and I walked out of that room a chaplain. I had finally gotten it. Prayer is not to ask God to save us or give us special blessings. Prayer is simply to open our hearts, to receive that gift of love. Prayer serves as a tool to calm our fears. It's not necessary to ask God to be God. I can't tell you how many times I read that in books that I encountered in seminary, but I guess that's why they called this clinical pastoral education. The actual experience is the only way to learn or own the information. It reminded me of a learning I had when I was learning to bake sourdough bread. I had taught myself through books and classes and trial and error, and I had gotten really quite good at it, but there was more to learn. Caring for the mother dough, the sponge, the autolyse, proper temperatures, retarding the dough overnight. One day I was so busy baking dozens of loaves of bread, and I noticed that my sourdough was rising really fast. I was impressed with myself. I thought, boy, you're really getting good at this. After the second rise, I punched the dough and waited for it to relax, and then shaped the dough, the batards and the baguettes. It was so soft and malleable. But I was baffled how quickly that they were growing. I put them in my oven. I had a deck oven, and directly on stones, and sprayed the oven with water. And when I went to check on my beautiful loaves, they had erupted in the oven, looking like with volcanic protrusions and gaping lesions. I was devastated. My beautiful bread was ruined. But my grief only lasted a minute or two because my thoughts retraced my steps, and I thought about what I'd been taught: salt inhibits yeast. I'd read that again and again, but I didn't remember until I had forgotten to add the salt. That's a clinical experience. This type of clinical learning is also less disastrous consequences than one encounters in the hair business. There's nothing quite like clinical learning when you learn firsthand that frosting bleach disintegrates hair. So, anyway, back to the minister with the heart surgery. His surgery was a success. And armed with my new insight with prayer, I searched for confirmation and found it. Paul Tillich's public withdrawal from prayer in 1960 finally made sense to me. He announced, "I no longer pray, I meditate." I reread the Gospels and wrote down every single word, every verse that referenced Jesus praying. And a book on the prayer life of Jesus literally fell into my lap. Hal Taussig wrote, "Jesus Before God." The reconstruction of the historical Jesus presents him as human, sane, and brilliant. His prayers were not directed at God as they were directed to the people who were listening. His prayer style asks that the one praying be involved in a social interaction and direct attention to God at the same time. And this was a Jesus I could believe in. His prayer, let your kingdom come, must have been uttered just as he was searching for wisdom, and he was also doubting and uncertain. God may be understood best, I think, as a verb instead of a noun. God isn't a being up in the sky, but a divine process of which we are all invited to participate. So what I learned as a chaplain and what began to work for me was to join hands with the person in front of me. Love what we know, what to love what's in front of us, that prayer said, the poem said. I didn't worry about finding the right words anymore. I was just calm, and they came. I opened my heart. As adults, we can forget sometimes to just love what is in front of us, which is probably the greatest prayer that we can have. I didn't raise the dead or make the lame walk, but I did learn that prayer isn't about what to say, but more about learning what to love in front of me. I connected with others in meaningful ways. I don't call myself a Unitarian Universalist Christian anymore, but my faith in the power of love and that community-forming power, that divine process, has grown stronger and stronger over the years. Meister Eckhart once said, "If the only prayer you ever say is thanks, it would be enough. It would be enough." So now let us lift our humming and our voices in song and sing My Life.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, the far-off hymn that hails on new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. to that rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? No prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging, when friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
As we extinguish our chalice and as we prepare to leave this sacred space, pack away a piece of this church in your heart. Wrap it carefully like a precious gem. Carry it with you through the joys and the sorrows of your days, and let its gentle glow strengthen you, warm you, and remind you of all that is good and true until you gather again with us in this community of love. May it be so, and go in peace. And please, if you are interested in joining the after-church fellowship, jump onto the Zoom link that was in the email this morning. Thank you for being here.